and sharing a few thoughts on a topic that I'm very interested and passionate about, and if it's about processes. So again, thank you for having me back, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. I don't have too many slides, so I'm hoping that we'll have a lot of interactions, and I would love to hear from you also along the way. So why don't we get started? How many of you out there are fans of processes? How many of you believe that's important? And if you do so, just go ahead and share your thoughts on the chat window here. That we'd love to take a look at and see why you think processes are important. So anybody out there, show of hands if you're on video, or feel free to put in the chat window why you think processes are important. I'm pretty sure there are process fans out here in our group today, this morning. See from Sharon,
Yes.
yes, Sue, no process, expect coordination. Okay, great. Bring consistency and efficiency. Thank you, Lisa. Fantastic. So, processes, there are different kinds of processes. They are all everywhere. We deal with them.
Please, we are lost. Please put on mute.
I think there's some background noise, but I think we're okay now. So yeah, I was saying, we deal with different kinds of processes, whether it is the product development process or the delivery of a project, whether any kind of service we provide, either to internal or external customer. Um, so what's the intended outcome of a process? It's really to deliver the product or service or something of value to that customer, whether it's internal or external, right? So that is the intended outcome. And as analysts, as engineers, as project managers, we are always looking to understand that better and finding ways to uh, delivering that value, right? Ultimately, we are trying to engineer a better solution. So that's what we generally on a day-to-day basis do in various aspects of whatever different types of process we deal with. So we try to understand, we try to analyze the process, we try to get a deeper understanding of it. uh, so inherently there is value that's being delivered in the process, right? So it's inherent, that's there's an intrinsic value, the value is intrinsic, and the process is really intending to deliver that value. And generally a process is known as a series of steps or activities, right? The overall goal is to look at it from an end-to-end point of view, though. While it does have a series of steps or activities, the overall goal is to improve the end-to-end process, the value that's getting delivered, uh, the speed of delivery of that, how quickly we can deliver that value, uh, how can we deliver more value out of the process, and we do that by analyzing that. And that technique is called value analysis. It's a systematic and assessment of these steps, and the goal is to improve design and deliver a better solution and with values sooner, or uh, additional value as we analyze that. So as I see here, many yeah, I think Pranab, I see that helps the team to improve, cut down waste. Exactly, and that is one of the process, one of the goals along the way to do the value analysis, analyzing steps, what it takes for at what's going on in each step. So this is also sometimes referred to as a value stream mapping exercise. Um, I'd love to hear on the chat if any of you have done that. Have you utilized that value stream mapping at home or professionally? Would love to hear your experiences, even if you want to speak to it on audio. Please, you can come off mute and would love to hear your thoughts. So what I try to do here is share with you a small example that a day-to-day basis William says you have at work, and Heather not yet. So what I wanted to kind of share is, while we can take myriads of examples from our day-to-day work, whether we are delivering a project, whether we are delivering overseeing the development of a product, or even whatever processes that are part of that entire life cycle of product development or project delivery. Or you may be in charge of delivering a service, whether it's a customer service. So regardless, the and it doesn't matter what type of project management delivery method we are, and that's one of the things. This is so common to any kind of approach, and it is quite powerful. And I wanted to kind of share a small example. Using a small example, I wanted to kind of share my experiences and how we can apply this technique of value stream mapping in our day-to-day life. Uh, so the every morning, obviously, my wife and I love coffee, and I tend to, almost every day make 2 cups of instant coffee, and we have it with milk and sugar. So the reason I'm saying that is it's it having an understanding of what that value needs to be delivered to the end customer here, right? So that's the example I wanted to share with you and the technique behind it, and let's see how we can uh, look at that. So here is my morning coffee example. Like I said, the goal here is to serve up 2 cups of coffee, instant coffee with milk and sugar. And the reason I keep saying that is, people have different. As a customer, there are different preferences. So here, the preference is it's instant coffee. It's with milk and sugar, right? And that's kind of having an understanding of exactly what needs to be delivered. So what I did was over time, I've kind of taken this and analyzed the different steps and trying to find ways to how I can help improve that process of making and delivering the 2 cups of coffee, right, every morning, pretty much. Uh, so breaking down this into steps, at the top you see here, it's taking the first cup, pouring milk, pouring water. We mix it up a little bit. It's not all milk and not all water. Heat it in the microwave. We've got a microwave, so we heat that in the microwave. And after the heating is done, we mix in sugar and we mix in coffee. Stir the coffee, wash away the spoon, right? So that's 1 cup of coffee, and then we kind of go down to the next cup. So the whole process continues. So the technique here is based on the work that was done by Karen Martin and Mike Osterling. It's a very simple read. I'd highly encourage you to check that out. You can just Google it or search for it in any of your search browsers for value stream mapping by Karen Martin. So uh, the technique that I'm sharing here and the abbreviations there, and I'll go over that a little bit here, is from that body of work. Any questions so far in terms of having an understanding of at the end of this process, what's the value that's being delivered, the steps that are taken to it. So as we analyze each step here, the let's look at the first, the process time, the PT, uh, in the middle in the tan color. Each step, I tried to, measured it, and let's say it takes about. It's just a small example, so it's you can all have different timings and different ways of doing it, but the idea to use the example here. So the process time for each of those steps there, you can see marked by PT, and they're all in seconds, right? So for taking the cup, again, it depends on your layout where you are and where you have these materials. So all that plays into this. So in this example, in my situation, uh, having an original state, each step, we note down the process time for each of these steps by itself. How long does it take to finish that? And then the next step is to identify the lead time, the term LT, right? And that basically is defined as how long does it take from the prior step, the completion of the prior step, to end of the current step. So, for example, uh, the lead time for the pour water is 44 seconds. So the prior step, pour milk, is ended, and then however long it takes for me from that point to finishing up pouring the water is the 44 seconds. So we identify these lead times along the way, we time it, and want to make sure that everybody understands the lead time. Any questions on the process time and the lead time? Any questions there?
So Murali, basically the lead time including the waste time, right?
Yes, it includes whatever delays in the middle, the or you're walking to a certain spot and coming back. Yes, exactly. The lead time is anything. It's any time, the total time from the completion of the prior step to the completion of the current step. Yes, Martin.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
Murali.
absolutely. So So when we do this, according to this technique, the next one that we have an understanding of is the percentage completion and accurate. What that means is, again, you ask the consumer or the people involved in this process for the next step, what is your percentage completion and accurate? So what percentage of times that prior step was completed and it was accurate so that you didn't have to go back. So many times I've received the feedback from my wife that, oh, I put less sugar or I put more milk or I put more sugar, it's watery. So again, this is feedback from the people who are involved in the process, including the customer of that step. So for example, heating in the microwave, uh, because it is a standard working device, 100% of the time, there is no need to reheat it. If we set the time that we want it, it's 100% of the time. Unlike in my case, where I had to, sometimes mixing in the sugar was sometimes way too more. I like a little bit more sweet, so that kind of, and my wife doesn't. So for my customer here, in the case of my wife, 75% of the time she's told me I get it right. So that's the percentage completeness and accuracy number for that step of mixing sugar, as an example. Any questions on that? So as we go through this analysis and identification of the steps and the time, because we are interested in the overall lead time, how long is it taking, beginning from the start, when we start, to the time it is delivered. That's when the value is delivered. So here, as you can see, unless I made some arithmetic mistake, the total lead time here is 652 seconds, and the total processing time here is 500 seconds. So the activity ratio is the total process time divided by the total lead time, and that comes to about 76%. And the rolled percentage completeness and accuracy is a product of, so you multiply each of the individual steps, percentage completeness and accuracy, right? So so that's the product of it. And unlike the other two, which are totals and sums, this one is a product of that. And basically, this means, you know, the completeness and accuracy. It doesn't mean that 24% of the time there are mistakes or defects, but it is in 24% of the times there is no need, uh, for rework, right? It's 25% of the times there's no need for rework. That's what it indicates. Um, any questions on that? So I do see a comment about the formal VSM extremely time consuming, um, and yeah, so that's a good comment from experience. Let's definitely talk about that too, as we kind of complete this example. So, any questions on this example from an original state, right? So this is how we did this in, one cup, and then finish up that and making the other cup. And this is kind of a small example using this technique. So the idea here is, we
Well,
know, and I will say that compared to IT work and knowledge work, where it is more creative work, that activity ratio, don't be surprised if that is very low. It's actually down in 30% or lesser in when creative work is involved, because this is not as much as a creative work. It is a pretty much a standard process. That's why you find the activity ratio here quite high. But in general, if you're talking about creative work or IT work, software development, um, where there are a lot of uncertainties and unknowns, that activity ratio is actually quite less. And don't be surprised by that. And that is actually very fairly typical.
so Murali, I have a questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
So the finding of this, does that tell us where is the area we need to improve? For example, should we look at in this case, the mix in sugar is the place we should improve to increase that percentage CNA from 75, hopefully will go to
Right.
90%.
That
That's
is that
the
that's one
outcome.
opportunity. True. As we look at each step, we try to improve that. But along the way, what we're really looking at is the overall process. Because in sometimes some of these steps may actually, we may find a different way that may actually take a little bit longer. Um, uh, from a process time or the delays, it may take longer. But what we're really looking for is to look at the overall end to end of that process. However, to your point, Martin, the percentage CNA, because it's 75%, yes, that by improving that, uh, you are overall in, improving the efficiency of the process. Absolutely right. Exactly. So the rolled percentage CNA is a testament. It reflects the efficiency of the overall process. So by improving that, yeah, we are really improving the overall efficiency of the process. But that's a good call out. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, this is a current state, which means this also give opportunity to see maybe there's certain step we can simplify or skip, right?
Correct. Exactly. Exactly. So that's a good segue as we go into our next slide. So again, each one of us, as we analyze, given our situation, we could make a lot number of changes that can help improve some of these steps. For example, the location. If the location of where the my refrigerator, where the milk is in one place, and where I keep where the microwave is and where the location of the sugar. By changing a little bit of that, we could change the process times or the lead times here, right? That's possible. So what I wanted to share here is one set of improvements, and what I in this example, uh, what this one shows, what I'm trying to depict here, and there are different ways of depicting this, but what I wanted to kind of talk you through this is ultimately what I need is the 2 cups of coffee, right? So as you can see here, I've shaded the first cup by a green border and the second cup by the red border, right? So just to distinguish whether we are talking about the first cup or the second cup. So the first cup, you see the steps: taking the cup, pouring the milk, pouring the water, heating in the microwave. While it is heating, instead of finishing up that cup and then go to the second cup, again, a very small example to illustrate, is while the first cup is heating in the microwave, this one reflects taking the steps of working on the second cup, taking that cup, pouring the milk, pouring the water, go ahead and mixing it in the sugar. So all along, I this one shows that we are able to accomplish these 4 steps while the first cup is heating in the microwave, right? And then uh, heat the second cup in the microwave. And while that is heating, we are finishing up the first cup by mixing in the sugar, mixing in the coffee, and stirring the coffee, as an example. So, and then once that is done, you take the second cup out of the microwave and you finish up that. Uh, so this is one example where I've tried to indicate some of the changes I've made. In addition to the sequence of tasks, what I also introduced, what I'm trying to show here as an example, is stirring the coffee. That symbol I used is by using a motorized stirring the coffee. So that that relates to if you are automating or semi-automating some step in your process. So that's one example where you know I I'm using sort of a manual stirring. I'm using a battery operated stirrer, for example, right? So that reduces potentially the process time, and potentially it in, it improves the percentage complete and accuracy because it is less prone to manual error, right? So that's one example of that. It mixes well because sometimes I've gotten the feedback from my wife that I've not mixed it thoroughly, right? So that could be a solution to introduce some kind of a different way of approaching it. In this case, the example is using a battery operated stirrer. Again, very simple example, but what I'm trying to show is and share is the analysis that you could automate some of these steps, right? Uh, and then in the last step, once again as an example, instead of washing a different spoon or washing the same spoon twice, since I've stirred it, we have eliminated one step there. So there's no need to have another step to. We have eliminated one step there. So I think um Martin, you alluded to that, we could make improvements, and these are some of the types of improvements. I already talked about the sequence. I already talked about the location of where your materials are, your ingredients are, uh, automating some of these processes, eliminating some of these steps, and so on and so forth. So in this example, after we did the analysis and the changing, and now when we go back to the lead time, this came out to be 486 seconds is the total lead time, with a process time of 462 seconds. And compared to the prior step, the activity ratio changed from 76% to a 95%. And some of the improvements that were made on the percentage C and A in this example changed a little bit, improved a little bit by going from 24 to 28%. So, so this is again another a small example, but trying to illustrate using this technique of making these changes and making these improvements. And there could be other possibilities too when you look at processes. The idea is to conduct this kind of analysis by having the right people who are involved in the process, who also usually also have better ideas and better solutions that they usually come up with. The people who work these steps are usually closer to a better solution, but providing that time and space for making that, the payoff is much larger. So, so going to Sue, your point, by doing this, yes, it is time consuming, but it is an approach that is a very customer centric approach. It is, and whether that internal customer or not, because what generally happens, while it is time, it can be time consuming, and it is in many cases. A lot of times we hear the some of the management approaches, traditional management approaches is, can we get the work done faster? you know can we get the work done faster? Can we get the developers to test fast, to develop fast, to code fast? Can we get our testers to test fast? That's where the focus is, right? But the idea behind this is to look at the overall process. um, it is to look at the what's happening in between the steps, how the steps are being done. So again, from a process analysis point of view, especially from a value analysis, looking at the overall end to end of the process, and looking at from a customer's point of view, looking at the what happens between these steps and doing these steps, are there better ways of doing that stuff, and not just expecting the people to do the work faster, is to analyze what's happening end to end. Would love to hear any comments from your
So,
experience, your thoughts.
yeah, so Murali, thank you very much. I'm wondering then, because we might have just suffered from a lack of direction or the proper expectation, right? We do all this work and then it's, well, what do we do with it? Because there's lots you can do. You can also aim for consistency, right? You make a sugar water mixture that's always going to be the same ratio, and so you have lots of things that you can do with this. And then sometimes you get a little overwhelmed, like, well, geez, we really could do more consistency. We could have better timing. We could have better quality. So we probably suffered from a lack of what are we going to do with this, and what things should we tackle first? Maybe the question is, when we do value stream mapping, is there an optimal um, uh, thing that you're trying to do first, right?
Mhm.
Like, is it really meant to showing, show problems with your timing? Is it meant to show problems with your, is there a
Mhm.
prioritization maybe that's
Yes,
meant for
that's a
previous
that's a
effort?
great point. But and like you said, so you're absolutely right. There is so many things that we can analyze that is part of our process. The prioritization uh, is, I would say, is to look at from what is the most important to the end customer. Um, uh, that generally tends to be the main thing to start with. Because there could be so many other internal things that can be looked at and try to improve. But to answer your question, and it's a great question, is to prioritize it from the customer's point of view. Look at that overall, and look at from when the customer is making that request, uh, and when we can deliver, when is it delivered to the customer, that process. And that is usually called the operational value stream. That's the one we want to look at first, because the other value streams, in terms of whether they are usually called support value streams, like the development value stream, and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, but that's a good question. But my short answer to your question is looking at from the customer point of view, an organization's operational value stream, which is there to service the customer to meet the need of the customer, if that helps.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Uh, there's also something that I'd like to add is, let's say in the arena of customer service, uh, or even if you're talking about software development, the defects that are reported, let us say, from a customer service point of view, there is a good chance that there's a whole bunch of them that we may never get to or want to. So rather than look at the lead time for every type of defect, this can be applied just to a particular category of defect. So in order to say, looking at the lead time of how long does it take from the beginning of this reported defect to the end, to the resolution and the delivery of that defect fix, uh, taking an average of everything, that may be a lot more. But the we may not be able to, or we may want to solve the high priority ones, for example. So the analysis to be done for the high priority defects is the one that we want to focus on. That's one aspect of it I wanted to say. The second one is, uh, it's it's not just when what is reported, it's kind of sticking with that example, but in the process of prioritization or triaging, for example, the ones that are approved to work, like there could be a whole category and your process could say, and you work this out with the customer, that you may have SLAs for the different priority. And you may, as part of your agreement, we may say that we're not going to really focus for this version of the product on the low product defects at all. So again, it depends on not just when the defect is reported, but from the point of time when that defect is approved to work on. So in other words, the high and medium priority might be taken up, and you want to start with that and not based on your agreement with the customer, not have to worry about the low priority defects. Uh, just wanted to call out that because uh, two things there is to talk about the lead time for a particular category of items that you're servicing. And the second part is it's not just when they come into the queue, but when they are those that are approved to start. Um, Again, I'm not saying that when they start to work on that, because that gets into an important concept that some of you may have thought about or have a question here is there's a difference between the term sometimes that is used, the lead time versus cycle time. The lead time is what we are talking about here. When from the time that the work is approved to all the way to delivering it to the customer. The cycle time is usually defined as when the work starts to the delivering the solution. So again, but what we are talking here and what we are needing to focus here is again from the customer's point of view is the lead time. That's what we are trying to improve overall. If that helps, just wanted to kind of call that out because people use these terms. Some people, some of us, sometimes that is used interchangeably, the lead time and the cycle time, and there's a distinct difference there between the two.
And Morale, I think the improvement can also be bring an option to here. For example, I like this the coffee creamer, so I can use that. So that would cover the milk and the sugar together. Right. So it's a process. You can also add another option
Yes,
that maybe technology change, right? So we can take a better the benefit of technology to even simplify the current
right,
state of the
exactly.
processes.
That's a great point you're saying, and I'm so glad you brought up this point because this is an important one, and that is why. Remember when I defined right in the beginning, I said 2 cups of instant coffee with milk and sugar, right? So from a customer's point of view, that is their preference. So without changing that, unless the customer agrees to it, right? Um, it is that is the expectation. So what we're trying to do is improve, but without uh, compromising on the expectation of the customer. To your point, if the customer is okay with having a coffee creamer um, as part of their coffee, and if they're okay with it, that's fine. Um, but unilaterally, as we analyze and make that improvement, that may not satisfy the customer because that's not what the customers expect. Does that help? I mean, but it's a great point. I'm so glad you mentioned because what you're mentioning is one of the reasons I was setting the stage for saying the customer in this case expects instant coffee with milk and sugar.
Yeah. Yeah, it helps, right? Because you do find a lot of problems when you value stream map, and then it's overwhelming.
Exactly. And also a lot of time we do a brainstorming, right? Because as a team, sometimes there's a great idea from any of the team member, but that also change the proposed solution as well. So that's why I always encourage my agile teams that, hey, feel free to speak up because your idea, it can be a good opportunity for us to investigate, even adopt if that makes sense to the business and even give more value to the business. So always don't hesitate to share your idea with the team because sometimes you'll be surprised at what kind of solution we can put together as a team.
You're absolutely right. The people who work on this, and that's why, as when we do this, it's most important to have the people who are most familiar with those steps to be part of this, so that not only they give us the 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 data in terms of assessing these steps and the timings, but also they're most likely closer to the solution. One of the things you may all have some experience on this is, while the people from the centers of excellence, for example, may be very passionate about this and trying to do this improvements, it's most successful when the line managers are behind and champion this, because that's where the work happens. And we really, while people from Center of Excellence and process specialists are very passionate about it, the successful value stream mapping and the implementation of the next steps, even if it's in small steps, um, is more successful when the people involved and the management of those people, the line management, as it generically called sometimes, uh, that's who we want them to be part of, champion, participate, and model that leading the way there, um, with the total support from people who are passionate about process and centers of excellence and things like that. Again, fundamentally, I think some of you all have already mentioned this clearly. You're all experienced in terms of awareness and practice of the lean principles and ways. Because regardless of the methodology, how we deliver a product and how we deliver a project, these are fundamental to many of those techniques, and that's why I kind of wanted to share this from because it's so much common to the different approaches. And just to summarize and share this, and this is from the Lean Enterprise Institute, uh, is this is what we're trying to do here is maximize the customer value while minimizing waste and using minimal resources as minimum as possible. But the main thing is to maximize the customer value. um, Again, to share the 5 principles of the lean process is really identify what is the expected value, uh, from the customer's point of view. That's why the the point that Martin you brought up is so important, is understanding from what the customer's point of view, what's the value they're expecting. Uh, then mapping that value stream identifying the steps and doing the value analysis. And the crucial part here is to creating a flow, a better flow. Uh, I'm I'm really excited about some of the new work that's coming to fore here. I'll speak to that as we summarize this. But creating the flow, um, by analyzing the steps in the process and looking at overall end to end, but it is the flow that we are also needing to keep an eye on. It's not only the steps, but the flow is towards that. So there are many different approaches in terms of understanding the flow. One of the basic ones is to have what is called, as you may already have heard, is the work in process limits. I prefer to call the expanded version of the term WIP as work in process as opposed to work in progress, because work in process is uh, is is what really what we are looking at. How much work is in process? How long are they in each of the steps? And what can we do to improve that? Um, Work in progress to me is a euphemism that kind of I feel loses the need to understand the work in process and how do we improve the flow there. And one of the common techniques is to identify the work in process limits, because by limiting the work in process in each status, we are actually going to be improving the flow of it. It sounds paradoxical. You're limiting something, but it actually ends up in improving the flow. So an understanding of the flow and how we can improve that by using different metrics like work in process limits and uh, understanding the what is the flow efficiency between the current state and what improvements, once we make the improvements, is that improving the flow efficiency. That's those are some of the metrics around flow. The other important principle is to go to increase the concept of a pull based mechanism as to pushing work, right? So, as we are looking at a process flow, encouraging people to pull work, let all the way to the customer, let the customer pull the work as opposed to us pushing it. So that is a huge change or approach in the mindset of going from a push to a pull based work. Uh, so it's not assigning work, but making it available. So when the person or persons or uh, if you're talking about robots also, when there are capacities available for them to pull, and all the way let the customer also pull when they are ready, as opposed to us pushing it on them when they may not be ready. So that is a very important principle of this lean process also. And then it's all about continuous improvement. um, Seeking that how can we constantly improve, uh, continuously improve towards the goal of seeking perfection. That's the ultimate goal here in terms of process analysis and constantly finding ways to deliver better and maximize the value delivered to the customer. So this is the very basic. You see different forms of this, but ultimately at the core of it, these are the five principles associated with the lean thinking and lean process. Anybody would like to add anything else from your experience, your viewpoints? So originally, I think we are talking about the delays and all of that, but here are the different waste types. Again, from the original work done by Taichi Ono, there are these seven types of waste: overproduction, waiting, conveyance or transportation, processing, inventory, correction, inventory, motion, and correction. And the delays and the rework and all of that, Martin, comes under the type of waste that is called as uh, that is referred to as the correction here.
Yeah, I'm going to say the rework is another waste we all experience
Yes,
from time to time.
yes. So that comes under the type of waste called correction.
Yeah, but also you mentioned about established pooling, right? So a lot of time when we're doing the design section, like a solution design, we also consider that method as well, because you don't have to. So people can always grab something when they need it, right? So that will definitely reduce the risk from the system perspective.
Yes, correct. Yep. So by pushing, we are just introducing more things in the flow. I mean, in the process when the flow is going to be affected. Um, so making sure that the things that need to be done, like Sue was saying, making sure that the priority items are there. So when they are ready to pull, they are pulling the higher priority items. Right? Absolutely.
Exactly. So this really aligns to the agile practice, right? When you have no matter it's a Kanban board or Scrum board, you all have some story in there ready to work. So they can always put that, into the working process,
Right.
and when the resource is ready.
Right. Whether we're talking agile, whether we're talking Scrum, Kanban, or general process analysis, the thing that I'm really keen on this application of this, it's regardless of those techniques. These are at the fundamental core to any of those types of approaches. Yeah. All right. I want to leave some time for additional discussions, but usually the question, and I think kind of like the writer's block, the question is, where do we start? Where do we start? How do we start? Right. Um, the the guidance here is start where we are right now, meaning we start with the current state, understanding the current state. That's where we start, and that's a good place to start. Um, but understanding where we are now, having an understanding of that, is the first part of it. Once we understand that, it allows us as a group that is involved in this process to understand, make assessment, and uh, come up with different ways of each step, but always keeping an eye on that lead time from a customer's point of view. Ultimately, that's kind of what we are measuring, because by optimizing the individual steps may or may not result in improvement of the overall lead time from a customer's point of view. So understanding where we are is the place to start, and the other part is keep that continuous, right? So start where you are and continue to do that as you're working on those priorities. According to the priority, continue on the next priority, or continue to it kind of goes back to the fundamental, what's known as the PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check, act, or sometimes it's also referred to as plan, do, study, act. The idea is that you work on something, you make that improvement, and that feeds potentially into further improvement. So that's basically uh, what I wanted to share. Would love to allow some time for further discussions and any other questions you may all have, either coming off on audio or on the chat. Feel free to share. Any any questions, comments?
Murali, this was a terrific presentation. And we do have a little bit of time for questions if anybody has any.
So one suggestion I have for everybody here is, if this is new to your organization or even to your team, just take this as an exercise. Start with your team first. If you see there's any process that has been, people have been struggling, you can either start this with your stakeholder and just say, hey, this is something you see may help us to easily pinpoint the root cause or improvement area that we can consider. But start with a small team and see how they respond to that. And also this will be a good example exercise. If it does work for your team, then you can expand out to the other team and let them to try. I've seen so many cases that when we go to the client, they have no idea what they can start with. So that's why we start putting the current state together. What visualization always help people to think better. So once you have that information, that Mara think about the flow, that would be a good thing to start with, and also identify what's the area that we really need to work on it.
Also in the chat, I put a link to this the work. It's a good document. I liked it, and what I really found is there are various types of examples. There is healthcare example, there is IT example, there are different examples that you'll find in this in this resource. It's a simple read, but it's pretty effective. So I wanted to share this. So in the chat window, I put the link to this document.
Thanks, Murali. I think that'll be helpful.
And the visual to go with that, just so that we can recognize. If you're looking at that, is I'm sharing this. This is hopefully you're able to see that this is the resource that I'm referring to. You have the link for it, and this is how it looks. It's pretty good work. And of course, Karen is actually local to Dallas, so I thought that was interesting too.
Great. Thank you, Murali.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to always come back and share a few things that I've seen at the core of improvements that we could make, and it's hard work, but I feel it's worth it. Again, thank you all. Appreciate you.